Welcome to the Dragon's Den. I'm your venerable host, Orochi, and today we're going to be talking about the only thing that really matters dragons. Especially today, we're going to be talking about a book series I've been working on, Scaleshifter, and what appears to be the final book in the series, The Dragon Bones. If you haven't looked at any of my other reviews talking about the Scaleshifter series, go do that first. This is basically just going to be reiterating that and going into details and spoilers about the book. So, same old, same old. This is a fantastic series. It has some dark things in it, but I don't think that it's too much for a lot of consideration to be said that this is probably a decent book for kids. Not super young, but I was reading very dark and adult material from a very, very young age, so I don't consider a lot of people are massively overprotective, I believe, when it comes to what they think books are and the age appropriateness for a lot of books. It's like the longer you wait to teach kids about reality and the darkness of reality, the less prepared they're going to be for it, and the less they will be able to be emotionally adjusted to these things. Because once you reach a certain age, it becomes harder and harder to grow into those stuff. It's weird that a lot of people don't see that. But anyhow, yes, I think a lot of people should be reading this series because it is fantastic. And that's pretty much the basis of everything I have to say about it. For more of the details, I just finished it, and it's pretty emotional. Like, this whole book is roller coaster of emotions because one of the more notable characters dies. I do think that that specific character should have had more time. The main character should have had more time with him to make his death harder hitting, because we know that he is the primary connection for Zia to be her. Other than Kal, he's the only one who sees worth in her. He's the only true dragon who gave her any sort of good stability. In the same way that Raka gave Kal that stability and family, Anoi is Zia's equivalent in that area, but we don't get nearly enough time with him to figure out who he is and to really make the loss of him to the story be as impactful. We know how much it affects Zia, but it doesn't affect us, the reader, because I don't think we get enough time with him and get to know him enough, which was unfortunate. I also say in the beginning, I felt that there wasn't enough of the separation between Kal and Caleb. Certain characters didn't really feel like they made that distinction often enough. It gets much better once he's around more humans, and there's certain characters who only see him as Kal, and there's certain characters who only see him as Caleb, and I think that is super interesting, but I don't think it's really... It never becomes like a major issue that characters really address. And I think that would be a cool thing if there is another book in the series, and I'll get to my thoughts on that later, but that would be a cool area, I think, to explore more, is to get, dragons and humans together that both care for him a lot and see the different sides of him and how they can get to know the full person that he is, where they only kind of see half of him at a time. And then other than that, there's minor editing issues, like spaces in the wrong place. There's some gender normal anomalies where it's talking about a male character and then it'll say she instead. That sort of thing. All really super minor. It For all the books that I read, it's very strange to me that who's ever proofreading the final version doesn't immediately pick up on these things. It just seems kind of weird to me that for several books that I've read that has an editor, for there to be like this many mistakes. I'm sure, everyone's under crunch and has to work super fast or this, that, and the other thing. But it just sort of stands out a little bit, which I think is unfortunate. That I could read through this book and just send back a list of like, here's 10 errors that I found. And I don't know. But it doesn't need to be perfect. None of these errors anywhere in the book I thought detracted from it at all. It never confused me like it has with some of the other books that I've read that have editing problems. So it wasn't a big deal. It's just a weird thing to me whenever I'm reading a lot of these books. And I think that I'm not sure if it would have helped to put more emphasis on it, but it does feel like there was a lot of de-emphasizing the language constraints in this book. It, talks about them swapping back and forth, and, the communication was definitely a problem, but it never got to the point where I feel like in the second book, when Zia was trying to talk to her mother, and it was such an emotional thing when she was desperately trying to speak the human language to her mother, and she can't because her accent from her new physiology is just so different that she can't speak properly. And then it sort of, after the second book, throughout the third and fourth book, it sort of just doesn't completely like whitewash it away or anything. It still mentions it, but it doesn't show it. Like whenever Zia says something, because she only has the human language. That's the only language she knows, but she's incapable of really speaking it properly. But the book just completely ignores that and says what she wants to say and what she's actually saying. And I'm torn on whether it would be a good thing to constantly, endlessly reiterate that by showing how bad her speech is. Because as much as it might be a bad thing, I am one of those people where I hate when people can't speak concisely. If you have like a lisp or speech impediment or a heavy accent or something, it's like when I can't understand you, it's frustrating. And it's frustrating for both parties when that happens, usually to the point where we can't then communicate. And so on the one hand, to have that just sort of brushed away so much, I think takes a lot away from anybody who's having those problems, because with a lot of the things going on in modern times and people being forced to move around and everything, I'm sure that's a big problem for a non-insignificant number of people. And so it might be helpful for anybody in that kind of a situation to see that it's a constant problem for her. And Zia at one point says, yeah, if I had the time, I would love to learn the dragon language more. There's multiple points in this book where she's watching Kyle and he knows a little bit of the language and a little bit of the culture, and she's jealous of him because she has no idea what's going on. And that's really cool. It's unfortunate that it couldn't have happened a little bit for her so that she could that the clear communication couldn't be more readily believed, because throughout this book you just know in the back of your mind that she's not communicating properly, but there's never a point in this book, or even like the third book I think, where anybody misunderstands what she's saying unless it's for a plot point, which I think is sort of unfortunate. But again, if it was there all the time, I'm sure as a reader it would be frustrating to deal with. So it maybe should have come up a little bit more here and there, like peppered in every once in a while. Or, one of the characters could just be like, I'm sorry, what? I didn't understand that. And then she'd repeat it, just to show that her ability to communicate is limited all the time. And even the few dragons that actually can speak to her in the human language also have that exact same problem. And so bringing up how frustrating it must be for them a little bit more, I think would have helped the story, and also helped to show why a lot of dragons are just like, I'm not even gonna attempt to speak the human language. It's fucking garbage, and this is just, to expect us to speak this garbage language is just arrogant of them, and such a, it'd be a good point of contention to be brought up a little bit more, as just more reasons why so many dragons look down on humans. It's like, well, they can't communicate properly, and all these little problems. And that it might have been nice to have it in a little bit more. The relationships in this are fantastic. Like, the way, really love the way characters get along with each other. And it's super interesting to have characters' opinions on each other change a little bit. And the relationship between Kal and Zia is, on the one hand, it's the sort of thing where it's like, well, you know where it's going. You know where it's going to end up, right? Of course you do. Star-crossed lovers, even from the second book, you're just like, they have way too much in common to not be companions of some sort. Even if it would just end up being best friends, that would have been fine. But come on, there's just way too much in common that it would be hard not to think of them as a couple. And I think that's massively expounded upon when there's a moment in this where, and throughout the whole series, both Kal and Zia do not think that they're worthy for the other, which is such a fantastic, mindset of, yeah, they're both, flawed individuals who have, I'm not going to just say like psychiatric problems. They've had trauma. They've had lots of trauma and been beaten down. And so it makes perfect sense why their own self-worth is so low that when they look at this person who they admire so much, they're like, man, I would love to be like that person. That person is so amazing, and I want to do whatever I can to make their life better. But there's nothing I can do to do that because I'm garbage, and if I'm around them too much, I'm going to bring them down. Like, that sort of mentality is a common thing for people who are in traumatic situations. So I think that's fantastic. And the point where Zia admits that to herself, where she's just like, I want what's best for him, but that's not going to be me, but I still want to be around and do the best I can, was such a beautiful moment. And then when Kal's sort of reaction to that is kind of, I think he was more in the lines of, he definitely wants to be there with her as much as possible to help her and make her see her own worth. That he wasn't in the place of denial as much as she was. He was like, oh yeah, I would love to have a relationship with her, but that's a dumb idea because I'm not worth it. Where she was more guarded, and she was just like, first off, I'm not good enough for him. Second off, every time I see people having relationships, there's too much war and death around, and then that's just more things that are going to be taken away from me, so why even bother right now? So she was far more guarded than he was, which I really liked, that they both sort of had the same angle towards relationships, where it's like, oh yeah, they both understand that, they've got a lot in common, but they also see all the bad stuff that comes with that, and so they have all of these similarities, then also understanding that all their differences are also similar. But it was when they actually get to know each other, and the fact that they both respect each other so much, and they both see in each other the things that they want to be, was just beautiful. And as that slowly manifested, and in this book they start swapping places some, because all throughout book 3 and in the beginning of this, it's all Zia's just like, oh, he's the mouthpiece of the gods, everybody listens to him because he has endless compassion, and he's just able to talk to people and make them see better versions of themselves that they would want to be, and she admires him so much for that. And Khal sees in Zia the hero that he would love to be, that she just sets her sights on something and then goes and does the best she can to achieve that goal, no matter the risk, no matter the cost, whatever it is. She finds the best way to accomplish a goal and overcome whatever obstacles are in front of her, and just unerringly goes towards it. But she views that as a flaw, because she's just like, yeah, I figure out what I think I need to do, and I go and do it because there's nothing else I can do. I'm worthless. And it's such a good thing to see how they disregard their own positives, especially when talking to each other, and don't see their own worth in that way. And even when somebody you care about and respect is telling you these sort of things, it's a constant thing that has to keep going on, because that's kind of a thing with mental problems, is like they're not easily overcome. Which is why I love in this one, because Zia starts becoming, the mouthpiece of dragons. She starts doing diplomatic stuff and being really good at it. And Khal starts taking on more of a accomplish goals and a fighter role, and being more active in accomplishing things. So they kind of swap roles, and then they kind of realize, like, oh, we've both achieved the thing that we desperately wanted to do. We're more like the person that we respect more than anyone else. And that's fantastic, because that just drew them together in such a vacuumous way that it was so beautiful to see, because they're just like, oh, we've rubbed off on each other, so we've kind of overcome a lot of our negative things because we've just become so much like each other. And that was so beautiful. But it was also nice that when Zia first realized that she, actually was fine with having a relationship with Khal, she also started saying that, she would like to look into it, but she also understood that there is a good chance that the amount of feelings that they have for each other is just because of all the situations that they've been in together. And I've actually seen people who have this problem where they're in a relationship just because that's the relationship they have. That, they went through something together, and that's the one thing they have that draws them together is this shared experience, but they don't have a whole lot more in common, and they're just the relationships like that don't work. And I like that Zia kind of acknowledges this that maybe all of her feelings for Call are just because of all of their similarities and all that. But it's great in this story that it's not just that. It's like they actually have a lot in common, and that's because they think so highly of each other and recognize traits in the other that they value so much, which was fantastic. I think it's a very great way to look at relationships that, I've seen far too many people in bad relationships, and there's so many reasons people will concoct to be in or stay in a bad relationship. And I think we actually have a lot of media, especially music and stuff, that supports that kind of thing. Like songs that are just like, oh, I have 1,000 reasons to leave, and I just need the one to stay. It's like, no, you need it. Relationships are the opposite. It's like you only need a few reasons for it not to work, whereas you should have a lot of reasons to stay with somebody, and it should be because you think they're kind, because you think they're loving, because they're, good at doing the things that you value. You have to share a lot of values in common. You have to be dedicated to each other. Like, you need to have so many positives for things to work out well. And that's what you want. You want to have good relationships, not just what's available to you. So that's why I think their relationship in this is so fantastic. And I would love, the war's over. The conflict, all the book's conflicts are resolved, basically. And so this is the end of the story. Now, I know that it is a bit of a problem with a lot of modern media that shows overstay their welcome. People will write a full arc for the whole story and then wrap it up, and then the powers that be are just like, oh, this is so popular, we have to keep it going because it's making us so much money. And then stories kind of fizzle out after there because nothing they make after that is part of the original design. But I will say the one thing that I would really love for a lot of stories is to, once they finish their story arc, to pivot and become more of a slice of life kind of story. Even if just for a little while, just like one extra story arc. And I understand that's a bit from, not wanting to let go of the characters and all that kind of stuff. But I actually have a vested interest in just seeing how would these characters progress with their lives. What is their daily life like after all this stuff? How do they, overcome the remaining traumas from all the bad stuff that they've been through? How do their relationships progress? What is the, like day-to-day routine kind of stuff that they get into? Is like, I kind of like that. I think the problem with most like slice of life sorts of things is that they all seem banal because nothing happened before that. Like, I actually am interested in what happens to adventurers when they retire. What is their life like after that? That whole sort of thing is like, that's interesting to me. I would like to see some of that sort of thing where it could just become, like a sitcom-ish, romantic comedy sort of thing. Just for a little arc. just a longer post-climax downward. I forget what the term is for book stories. You have the climax, and then you have the prologue, like a prologue kind of thing. Just like a longer version of that shows you, paints out a nice long path of this is what the characters are doing afterwards. I really love the idea of that sort of thing. Just, I don't think enough stories actually show like day-to-day things that characters can do to just be supportive of each other and that sort of stuff. Most stories are all just, big things are happening and emotional moments and stuff. And it's like, well, what about the day-to-day sort of things? Like, some people might need more of that just to assure them that, hey, this is normal everyday activities that you should probably be doing with the people that you care about or the people you respect or whatever. And so showing more aspects of life would probably be helpful to a lot of people. But yeah, it's probably over, and it was fantastic. As a little bit of a segue, I've read some of the other authors of books that I've read. Their reasonings for writing books about dragons are kind of strange. Like, a lot of these authors are just one-offs. Oh, dragons fit the sort of story I was going to, or I was inspired by a dragon story to write this, but then it's not ever going to be their thing again. And I kind of hope to find authors who do more dragon stories. Like, this one was so good, I hope Shelby does more stories about dragons, even if it was in this world or another one. It'd be really fantastic because we need more good dragon stories. I've got a few more to do reviews on, and I'm sort of contemplating whether I want to do reviews on samples that I've been reading, because there's a lot of dragon stories out nowadays, but after reading a sample of so many of them, there's something about different things for different stories, but so many of them have one or two things that are just massive red flags to me, and I'm just like, oh, I don't think I want to read this. But I think when I get some time, I'm probably gonna have to read through some more books that I don't think I will like so much, just that I can give reviews on them. But I don't really want to give bad reviews to books. I would prefer to just talk up stuff that I really like, but we'll see how that progresses. I know negative stuff usually is more attractive to people, but I don't see the point in doing that. But yeah, go out and read this series. It's super good. And as always, after reading a series, you just get that negative feeling. It's like, oh, it's all over. That's so sad. I just want more, which is unfortunate. But anyhow, that is all for now. See you next time.